Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So we're lineup building for week 9 of the NFL season over on Draftkings, more so focusing on cash game roster construction. Now a couple of things before I start this video. Number one, do not just take this lineup and use all of your contests. I'm not even sure what it's going to look like yet. I am building this on the fly with you guys. We are just building it together. And you guys have to be able to think for yourselves and build your own lineups. I'm just going through a cash game roster construction process, picking players that meet a certain criteria. That would be they're going to get sufficient volume, they're good matchups, I like their price tags, they're in a good game Vegas-wise, and they're going to be decently high owned because in cash games, I'm just trying to beat half the field here. I'm trying to make a nice, safe, solid lineup. In tournaments, yeah, we can take those low-owned guys that can certainly bust your lineup, but they can also take you to the very top and win a tournament. That's not the goal in cash games. In cash games, we're just trying to beat half the field and pick a nice, safe, high-volume, safe floor lineup, and we'll let other people make mistakes. And with that being said, if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. Without further ado, let's dive right into it. So I think this is a very interesting week, and I feel like it's a wide open week because you can go many ways. You can spend down for positions, you can spend up for positions. You can pretty much do whatever the heck you want this week, and I think it's quite interesting. But for me, in cash games, you guys know I like to start with running backs because I feel like that's the most important position in cash games. So let's slide over to the running backs, and I have like a cash game running back pool this week, and I'll just tell you guys what it is. It would be Dalvin Cook, James Conner, Chase Edmonds, Josh Jacobs. I also like David Montgomery and David Johnson, and I feel like Justin Jackson, he's more tournamenty, but you could roll him out in cash games too if you need the salary savings. But for me, let's just start with the core. So I'm gonna build a couple lineups here. I'm gonna do one where I spend down for quarterback. Then I'm gonna do one where I spend up for quarterback. And I think the first one we're gonna do is we're gonna spend down for quarterback and see what that looks like. Because I know last week spending down for quarterback certainly did not work. Because I really like Jimmy Garoppolo, and I know he was super high owned, but still he definitely sunk some lineups. Like he was absolutely awful. But we're gonna start with the most expensive guy, and that would be Dalvin Cook at $8,200. He draws a great matchup here versus Detroit, one of the worst run defenses in the league. I know it feels like we're point chasing a little bit, but even if he didn't go off last week, I would still like him here versus Detroit. He's just a little bit more expensive than he usually is because he scored 51.6 Draftkings points last week. But the guy's seeing over 20 rushing attempts per game. He had 30 carries last week, 4 touchdowns. He's a cable pass catching running back. In Detroit, they're just not a very good defense at all. I believe they're 4-point favorites at home. I don't have the Vegas totals right in front of my face right now, but I know they're decently sized favorites at home, and that sets up well for the running back. So Dalvin Cook, you should have another huge day. Not saying he's going to get 51 DraftKings points again, but it would not surprise me if he gets 20, 30 plus. I mean, it's a great matchup. He's one of the best running backs in football. He makes a ton of sense for me this week. So we're going to plug him in first, and since this is going to be the lineup where we spend down for quarterback, we're probably going to end up going Drew Lock. We can spend up for all 3 running backs here, so I'll just plug in James Conner and Chase Edmonds, but I'll talk about each one a little bit here. So James Conner, he's in a great spot versus Dallas. I believe they're 14-point favorites on the road, so that sets up well game flow-wise for James Conner. And he's actually not having that bad of a season. We know how bad Dallas is, so I expect the Steelers to be able to run the ball pretty much the entire game. With these, they're one of the worst defenses in football. They're allowing nearly 170 rushing yards per game. So James Conner at 6,900. I think we're getting a great price tag on him. He's going to get volume each and every single week. He's also a little bit involved in the passing game. We should see around 20 or 30 touches from James Conner at 6,900 versus a very, very poor Dallas defense. You can sign me up for that pretty much all day. So definitely like James Conner. And since we're going to spend out for quarterback, like I said, we can fit in another expensive running back, and I guess we'll just go the Chase Edmonds route because Kenyon Drake's going to be out for this game. That was officially ruled yesterday, and look, he's been good this season even with Kenyon Drake playing. Now you take Kenyon Drake out, Chase Edmonds is going to be the absolute man here. He's been clearly the best running back in that backfield, and the thing is, he's been doing pretty well without like a ton of volume. Like Kenyon Drake was getting around 20 touches per game. Chase Edmonds was only getting around like 3, 4, 5 carries per game, but he was very involved in the passing game. As you can see, the past few weeks, 7 targets, 2, 6, 6. I mean, the targets might remain the same because Kenyon Drake wasn't really involved in the passing game. He's only getting about 2 targets per game max. But Edmonds now, he should see around 20 carries, and he's going to be involved in the passing game. So we're looking at 20, 30 touches in a very good matchup versus Miami. They are dead last, 32nd DVA versus the run, and they're giving up quite a bit of points to the running back position as well. So Edmonds, he was good without Kenyon Drake. With Kenyon Drake, and now you take Kenyon Drake out of the equation. Edmonds should have a very, very strong game, and I'd be surprised if he doesn't get around 100 rushing yards, get some 5 to 8 targets here, and have a really strong game. So I feel pretty good about jamming in all these running backs here. Now the problem is we're going to have to spend on other positions, but running backs are, for the most part, the most important position to me in cash games. Wide receivers are very important too, but we should be able to still afford one. And cheap wide receivers, they tend to pay off more than cheap running backs that are definitely backups. Like some weeks we'll get Jamal Williams at $4,000, which, I mean, not some weeks, but we got that one week where it was $4,000 and it was just an easy plug-in without Aaron Jones. We don't really have that this week, so I'd rather take a flyer on a wide receiver that could randomly hit a big play rather than just trying to get a backup running back that maybe sees a couple of carries. So definitely like the jam in running back strategy this week. Dalvin Cook, James Conner, Chase Edmonds, all these guys would not surprise me if they score 20-plus points. So I think that gives us a really nice floor in cash games, and each one should see around 20 to 30 touches if we're being honest. So I'll take that all day. And since we're going to spend that for quarterback, I already mentioned that. So we're obviously not going to be able to fit in Watson, Josh Allen, Wilson, these kind of guys. So in this lineup, I'm not saying it's my preferred way to go, but we're going to plug in Drew Lock just because he's 5,200 facing Atlanta, one of the worst pass defenses in football. I believe they're giving up the second most points for random quarterbacks, or it might be the first most. But either way, giving up 320 passing yards per game, and they've allowed a 300-yard passer in all but one game this season. Now, I know Drew Lock's not the best quarterback in the world, but he's thrown the ball around 40 times the past 2 weeks. They're probably going to be trailing in this game. Atlanta's defense is awful. We have a 50-point over-under in this game. It's got sneaky shootout potential, and Drew Lock did have 20 fantasy points last week, and he did through the game-winning touchdown. $5,200. If he happens to get us 20 points, I think we will take that, especially with these stud running backs that we have in our lineup. So just a price and matchup play for Drew Lock, and this is our spend down at quarterback lineup. So again, not expecting too much from him, and it can certainly bust, but I don't feel too bad about that. So now we'll plug in some wide receivers in my favorite spend-up wide receiver of the week, just when you factor in the price tag, matchup, Vegas, and everything. It's going to be Tyler Lockett, because this Buffalo pass defense has not been that great this season, and he's about $1,000 cheaper than DK Metcalf. Like, DK Metcalf could easily have a huge game here like last week. He definitely had the bigger game than Tyler Lockett did. He had 43.1 DraftKings points, 15 targets, is absolutely smashed. That's the upside he has each and every single week. And he should draw the best corner on the Bills, which would be Tre'Davious White. We know he's a very good corner, and he could certainly slow down DK Metcalf. Now, I said similar things last week with Jason Verrett because he's having a great season, and I'd assume he was going to be able to at least slow down Metcalf. Not the case. Metcalf is an absolute monster, so I'm not really too concerned with Metcalf here, but if I can get Tyler Lockett, who should see similar volume and has equally big game upside, $1,000 cheaper, and he's going to avoid Tre'Davious White for the most part in the slot, I'll take it. So Lockett at $6,800. This game has around a 54.5, 55-point over/under. Pretty much the best game of the week that you can target. Now, he's certainly had some down weeks, but he's had some big games as well. 56 points versus Arizona. He had 40 points versus Dallas, and 19 and 17 versus Atlanta and New England. So Tyler Lockett, feel pretty good about that. Like that price tag. I also really like Keenan Allen, too, at $7,000. He's only $200 more. Maybe at the end of this lineup, be able to fit him in over Tyler Lockett. But I do think Tyler Lockett's going to be the higher owned of the two. But I think it'll be very, very close. But definitely like Tyler Lockett, I do want exposure to that game. And I don't really think I'm going to be able to get any more exposure to this game in this lineup, just eyeballing it. So I'd like to get at least a piece of it. And then moving on, I think we can plug in the tight end because it's kind of clear cut who you're going to use at tight end this week. I think you either use Noah Fant or you use Hunter Henry. For this lineup, I'm going to plug in Hunter Henry. He gets volume every week. Las Vegas' pass defense is pretty rough. I believe they're 27th DVA versus the pass. Now, the past few weeks for Hunter Henry, it's not been too impressive, but he gets targets each and every single week. His quarterback is awesome in Justin Herbert. So we're going to plug him in at only $4,000. I believe this is the cheapest he has been all season. So we'll plug him in. And now that I'm thinking about it, it would probably make more sense to use Noah Fant since we have Drew Lock in our lineup. But if we have money left over at defense, just punted defense, we'll plug in Noah Fant over Hunter Henry. But now we're going to try to have to fill in our two wide receiver positions. And at this point, I usually try to plug in a defense to see where I stand a wide receiver. But I think defense is just play whoever the heck you want that's cheap this week for the most part. I think anyone from Washington football team and down at least is somewhat viable besides like the bottom two defenses that are facing the Chiefs and the Seahawks and whatnot. So let's try to find a mid-range wide receiver because I know we're not going to be able to fit in a guy like Keenan Allen, Will Fuller, Adam Thielen. It's just not going to happen in this lineup. So a couple of wide receivers that I like down here. I like Cole Beasley against Seattle. I like Brandon Cooks. Don't really like Amari Cooper. I think DJ Moore's fine just because I feel like they're going to be passing the ball quite a bit. Chase Claypool's in a great matchup versus Dallas. I like Marvin Jones a lot versus Minnesota, especially if Matthew Stafford happens to be cleared for this game. There's a chance he can get cleared tomorrow morning. He'd have to take a private jet, I guess. But there's a chance he plays, and if he does play, I mean, that just boosts Marvin Jones up for me because this is a pretty bad Minnesota secondary, and they're also down 3 guys, so he should be able to eat them up for the most part. But for this lineup, I'm going to plug in Brandon Cooks just because I really like the spot versus Jacksonville. They're 32nd DB versus the pass, and he's been getting targets the past few weeks. Like, he's been great. He just had 12 targets week 5 versus Jacksonville, the team he's playing this week, 9 targets versus Tennessee, and 9 targets again versus Green Bay. And he went absolutely off versus, voice just cracked. He went absolutely off versus Jacksonville. He had 161 yards, had a touchdown, had 33.1 DraftKings points, and absolutely crushed. He was only 4,100 that week too. Now, unfortunately, he's 5,500, but again, he's been almost getting double-digit targets per game, and at 5,500 versus one of the worst pass defenses in football, Brandon Cooks is a pretty nice play for me. So like him quite a bit. Now you have 3,300 left, so you're gonna have to factor in we're gonna play a cheap defense, and there's a cheap wide receiver I like this week. And since we don't have Marvin Jones, I'm gonna go with the other Detroit wide receiver I like quite a bit, and that would be Danny Amendola at $3,700. Now, I think the thing with Danny Amendola, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Like, if Chase Daniel is the quarterback for Marvin Jones, that certainly hurts his upside. But even if it is Chase Daniel for Danny Amendola, I don't really think that makes much of a difference because I feel like he'll just check down even more. So maybe it'd be even a boost for Danny Amendola because Amendola is not the kind of guy that's going to be running 50-yard fades on the sidelines. He's running crossing routes. He's running underneath stuff. Just, he's the possession wide receiver. So either way, I don't really care who the quarterback is. Obviously, he always has more upside with Matthew Stafford because he's just a better quarterback. But Danny Amendola, he's really cheap. There's no Kenny Golladay. He's below 4K, and he's facing one of the worst secondaries in football. I believe they're allowing the third most points per game to wide receivers. So Danny Amendola at $3,700, I feel like that's a pretty nice and easy plug-in this week, and I think we're going to see a handful of targets. Early on in the season with no Kenny Golladay, he had 7 targets and 7 targets, so I think he's a fine play. So we're going to plug in Danny Amendola, and at this point we have 2,900 at defense. And I really don't care what defense you play this week. I mean, obviously I wouldn't want to play the Cowboys, Panthers, and those kind of guys. But we have 2,900 left, and we could fit in the Cardinals. They're facing a rookie quarterback in Tua, which I know Miami hasn't been awful this season. I don't really love the Cardinals defense, but I guess it's not even that great of a correlation with Edmonds because Edmonds is going to be fine even if they're trailing because he's really involved in the passing game. But we'll just plug in the Cardinals defense just because it evens out the lineup. Now, I don't think that's a bad, cheap quarterback lineup. So you got Drew Lock, great matchup versus Atlanta. Dalvin Cook, I think that speaks for itself. James Conner, high volume spot versus Dallas. Tyler Lockett, just getting exposure to that Seattle and Buffalo game. Brandon Cooks, great matchup versus Jacksonville. Danny Amendola, no Kenny Golladay, facing a very beat-up secondary right now and just overall not a good secondary. Henry, he's cheap. Edmonds, no Kenyon Drake. And then the Cardinals defense, they fit at the end. So I actually think that's a decent spend-down lineup at the quarterback position. Now we'll try to make a couple of tweaks here. I'm just going to see what this lineup would look like if we could get in like maybe a Marvin Jones over Brandon Cooks just to save some money. Now, you'd be doubling up at the wide receiver position, but again, no Kenny Golladay. And if Matthew Stafford's in, I don't think that would be a bad way to go. Then we can plug in the Texans defense versus a new quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I could see that being a decent way to go. So at this point, we have 200 left. If you want to double up, so you'd have 2 Chargers two Chargers pass catching options and 2 Detroit pass catching options, you could go the Keenan Allen route here, but to be honest, this lineup looks a little bit worse than the first one we built, so it just gives you some options, though. I just wanted to mention that I really do like Keenan Allen. He gets a great spot versus Las Vegas. They're actually graded dead last in coverage according to PFF this season. And he gets targets each and every single week, 12, 13, 2 versus New Orleans, but you have to keep in mind he only played like a drive that game. Then 11, 19, and 10. Justin Herbert's been awesome. Keenan Allen's very good, and he should be able to eat up in that matchup. So I definitely like Keenan Allen. Tyler Lockett, I think that's really just a toss-up. If you use Keenan Allen or Tyler Lockett this week, you should be able to afford one. Because like I just showed you guys, I was able to afford Dalvin Cook, James Conner, Chase Edmonds, and I could use a spend-up wide receiver in either like a Tyler Lockett or Keenan Allen. So now we're going to do a spend-up quarterback. And if I do a spend-up quarterback, I'm probably not going to be able to fit in Dalvin Cook, unfortunately. But there's some other good mid-range running backs on this slate. So I'm just actually going to clear this lineup. And then I'm not going to just re-talk about everyone again, but let's plug in. So for a spend up, we can either go like Josh Allen, Deshaun Watson, or even Justin Herbert. Because, look, I like Russell Wilson, I like Kyler Murray, I like Patrick Mahomes, but I just can't really see myself fitting them in this week. And you can save a couple extra bucks, which for guys I think have similar upside this week. So Deshaun Watson, let's just talk about each one just a little bit. I mean, he's been fantastic the past few weeks. If we're looking since week 4, 23, 29, 35, 27, hasn't had less than 300 yards passing, so he's been getting the bonus each and every single week. And if you're looking at week 5 versus Jacksonville, you had 360 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and nearly 30 DraftKings points. So I definitely like Deshaun Watson. They have a team total of nearly 29 this week. Now, this game, there's potential for it to get out of hand. I believe they're pretty decently sized favorites, but I mean, their defense is so bad. I could see at least being close, and Deshaun Watson should have a pretty big game here. Then we also have Josh Allen and who else? Justin Herbert. I think he's a fine option as well. He's obviously been fantastic. Josh Allen, he's been kind of skidding a bit. Like early in the season, he was on absolute fire. Like he was scoring 33, 37, 36, even 25. And after that, it's been a little bit rough for him. But he has rushing upside each and every single week, so you get that nice floor with him. And he just draws a fantastic matchup versus Seattle. I think he's going to be the guy we're going to plug in here. Maybe at the end we will afford Deshaun Watson, so we'll just play around with it. But look, Seattle's been so bad versus quarterbacks this year. I'm pretty sure they're dead last. It's either Atlanta or Seattle that's dead last, but either way, they're giving up around 30 DraftKings points per game to quarterbacks and nearly 400 yards passing per game, which is absolutely insane. I believe it's specifically at 366 right now. So Josh Allen, $7,000, and a great game for fantasy purposes. He's playing at home. We're going to plug him in. And like I said, we're probably not going to be able to afford Dalvin Cook, unfortunately. So let's just plug in James Conner in... Did I say James Conner? I think I was thinking of Chase Edmonds. James Conner and Chase Edmonds. Because if we're not going to play Dalvin Cook, I at least want those two guys in for sure. Now we're going to have to find a mid-range running back. So I think there's quite a few ways you can go this week. I think you can look at Josh Jacobs. I think you can look at David Johnson. You could also look at David Montgomery. For this lineup, let's just plug in Josh Jacobs at 6,300. He had a ton of volume last week. Now you got to keep in mind that was a weather game. Yeah, so they weren't really throwing the ball too much. But he had 31 carries, 130 yards. Again, he wasn't like super efficient, but he got a ton of volume. Didn't really do anything in the passing. He only had one target, but he's fine. He should get you 20 plus touches. He's averaging over 20 rushing attempts per game this season. So we're going to plug him in just from a volume standpoint. I also like that game for fantasy purposes. I believe it's a 51 or 52 point over under. It's only a 1 point spread, so it should be pretty back and forth. And the Raiders love to run the ball, so we're going to plug in Jacobs there. And we don't have Dalvin Cook, but it's like it was pretty much like a 2v2 of either Josh Allen and who was it? Josh Allen and Josh Jacobs, or Drew Lock and Dalvin Cook. So if it comes down to that, it's kind of like up to you if you decide whichever. I mean, Josh Allen, Josh Jacobs feels pretty good because you're still going to get plenty of volume. Josh Jacobs, I just don't think Jacobs has the same ceiling that Dalvin Cook has on a weekly basis. It's also a better matchup for Dalvin Cook as well, but you can go many ways this week. So let's just start filling in some other positions. So we're going to plug in Hunter Henry again. I already talked about him. Wide receivers, probably going to go the Tyler Lockett route once again. If I can find him. Probably plug in Brandon Cooks again if we can. Sorry, I'm filling this out quicker, but we already talked about these guys, so it makes no sense to just keep talking about them again. And then we're going to try to plug in Amendola. Let's see if we can make a similar lineup here. I'll try not to get too different. Then we have $3,000 for our defense left, and then you could plug in the Chargers, which you're not going to do because you're playing Josh Jacobs. The Titans versus Chicago, I think that's viable. We have the Cardinals defense again if you just want to plug that in. So really, for the most part, all we did was we took out Dalvin Cook, then we put in Josh Jacobs, and we took out Drew Lock, and we plugged in Josh Allen. We have $100 left, so we could go up to Deshaun Watson if you prefer Deshaun Watson over Josh Allen this week. I'd understand that. Then you get the pairing with Brandon Cooks as well. But yeah, quite a few ways you can go this week, and hope this video was helpful, guys, because I think that's all it's going to be. So if this video was helpful, make sure you leave a like on the video. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. If you want to follow me over on social media, I'm at Pennell16 on Twitter, cpen16 over on IG. And if you want to support the content over on Patreon, that is always much appreciated. You get access into the entire NFL DFS data sheet. You can hop into the Discord chat as well. I think that's pretty much all I got to say. Again, don't just copy these lineups and use all of your contests. If you like them, you use them. Sure, that's fine, but you still have to use your own process, pick your own favorite players, build your own lineups. I just built these lineups on the fly. I'm sure these will look different when game time comes on Sunday morning, but I'm going to get out of here, guys. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll have my core plays video up later on this afternoon or evening.